Did you know that the longest running study on happiness, done by Harvard, found that the number one predictor of a long, healthy, happy, joyful life wasn't money, success, or genetics? It was the quality of your relationships. So why does connection feel like the first thing we sacrifice when life gets full? Hello, I am Jay Nicole Smith. You can call me Nick. This is the JoyFirst podcast, and today we are diving into the connection category of our JoyFirst Audit, which we've been exploring so far this season. Now, so far we have covered vitality and money, and now we're on category 3, connection. And this one is super important because this joy code, this connection piece, is what holds everything else together. But it can be one that feels the most out of our control, the most difficult to manage when we're managing everything else, and a place where if we don't have it, we can struggle to see and feel the joy in the other categories of our life. So let's dive in and have a look at my connection category in the JoyFirst Audit, because that's what we're doing. I'm taking you behind the scenes of where I'm actually at. This is the first one of the 3 categories we've looked at so far where I actually scored really high. And this is something I am super duper grateful for. I often say I don't know how I got so lucky, but I managed to find, in particular, a life partner who not only is a perfect fit for me and is super supportive and who I feel really connected to, but who also has an amazing family who is a huge part of my support system, having moved from the US to the UK where I basically knew no one, and his support system became my support system. On top of that, I have wonderful friends, both the mums, that live in my neighborhood and whose kids go to school with my kids, as well as incredible peers from around the world who I've met online as a part of the business communities that I'm a part of. And when it comes to some of the most important connection of all, the relationship I have with myself, that's been an area I have been lucky enough to be doing work on for over 20 years, because I really do believe that becoming an entrepreneur forces you into personal growth, which I started at like 20. So the work is long and enduring and it's never done, but my relationship with myself now is so much better than it was 2 years ago or 6 years ago or 12 years ago. But something really interesting is happening, and I feel like this conversation has come up with every single one of my friends. I even had this conversation with my mastermind buddy this week where we're supposed to be talking about business and our books, but we ended up having a deep dive in this particular topic because I feel like what so many of us are going through in the messy middle where we're reaching our 40s and raising young families and trying to hold it all together is that this combination of stress from life and hormonal changes from perimenopause and just entering this vortex in our 40s of the I don't give a fuck era of being where we are, a lot of which is connected to this hormonal changes that we're dealing with. Plus, for me personally, navigating a new neurodivergence diagnosis, which really has redefined everything I think and know about myself. And it's complicated. I will definitely dive deeper into this in the Substack where I talk more personally and vulnerably about these sorts of things. But it actually has helped me be a lot more kind with myself. So there's a few questions in this connection part of the audit where it's about the relationship we have with ourselves. And I feel like I score a bit higher on that at the moment because understanding the autistic parts of my brain, the ADHD parts of my brain, the way my brain works is just different. And having language for that now of what those things look like and how they might present and what they mean has actually helped me have a whole lot more compassion for myself. And it's really changed my ability to understand myself, give myself what I need, and actually lean into self-care in a way that's really effective with so much less guilt and so much less judgment. Still there, not gone completely, but that's been a really important part of this whole conversation for me as well. So let's dive in to some of the questions in this part of the audit. If you want to go take this audit for yourself, just as a reminder, you can find this in Substack. Right now, that's the only place you can get access to it. If you join us as a free member, you'll get a cool analog, simple version. If you actually join us as a paid member, I built a really cool custom AI co-pilot to help walk you through the audit, the quiz, score it, and then help you take some really important next steps to feel a little bit more joy first alignment in your life and in your work. So that is a very cool opportunity for you, which you can find at Joy First World within the Substack world. But for now, let me take you through a few of these questions that are in this category so you know what we're talking about here. And then I'll tell you my score and the bits that are actually a little bit more complicated than they may seem when it comes to how this works out for me. So, questions. I feel at home with myself. I speak to myself with kindness. I have at least one safe relationship. I feel emotionally supported by someone. I feel connected to my partner or closest people. I feel able to ask for help. I have friendships that nourish me. A bunch more questions, and there's also questions here around I feel supported in my work or creative life. I feel safe expressing my truth in relationships. So if you want to see all those questions and take the audit, join us on Substack. My score for this category was actually 14 out of 15. So actually a bit stronger than I thought it would be. And I want to dive into that a little bit because even though I scored really strongly, I feel like there's subtext here that I think is really, really important. So on the one hand, there's the connection we have with ourselves, with our children, with our partners, with our work. Also, I think an important part of the connection here is our connection to source, to spirituality, or if you have any divine practice that helps you feel grounded and connected to God or a religious community or wherever you feel that strength and that connection to something bigger is also an important part of this. But what I find really interesting is the difference between feeling connected and not being alone. I feel like for so many of us, especially moms, we very rarely are alone. We're always surrounded with people, right? We have our kids, we have our partner, we have work, and we're surrounded by people all the time. But I think the connection piece is really different because that involves actually feeling seen. It involves actually feeling nourished. It involves actually feeling a sense of belonging and not loneliness in a room full of people. And those are very different experiences. And I think given the conversations I've had with so many women at this life stage, there's a very good chance that we are surrounded by people but feel very alone. And part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation is to say to you, you are not alone. So many of us are going through such similar life experiences right now as we navigate our body, our work, our families, our marriages, and try and just figure it out while also doing the best we can. And this has been a really interesting journey for me because I definitely feel like given the state of my nervous system and how difficult that sense of just feeling safe, that baseline of like, all good, where joy can actually seep in, has felt like it's so hard to actually find recently, that the step above that to actually connect with people has been challenging. And what I have found is actually it's been easier for me to do that in friendships, in groups where maybe there isn't as much intimacy, where I don't maybe know people as intimately, but can feel like an instant sense of belonging or connection, has actually been easier for me right now than it has been in the past. And the intimate relationships that I have been harder. And that's usually been opposite for me. I don't know if you're this way, but typically I'm a person who doesn't like small talk, never really been into networking. Like, I've not necessarily been someone who goes out and makes new friends all the time. I wouldn't consider myself crazy social. I love conversation and I love people, but I'm that person who's like, tell me your whole life story and let's like bond over our trauma. That's my neurodivergence, I've learned. But not so much like, let's talk about the weather and how your kids are. Like, I find that stuff really hard. So this is a new experience for me of finding those casual, less deep relationships a bit easier. And I think that that is so much related to the experience that I'm having within myself and just feeling so depleted all the time. And we talked about this in the vitality audit. That's a good one, to go listen to if you're also struggling with perimenopause, anxiety, the stuff that I've been navigating. But for example, I'm in a really interesting place in my marriage where we're renegotiating a whole bunch of stuff in our life because we're in what feels like a new stage. I feel like we're stepping out of that stage where our kids are babies and helpless and so hard work all the time, where we have just that little bit more breathing room. They're now 5 and 6. And so they still need us all the time, but they will actually play with themselves for, 40 minutes now, or they can actually be reasoned with a little bit more now. And so it feels like this graduation into this next stage of our life and how we want to be as parents and what, now we're into like the activities and being a taxi and driving them around and new parenting choices, new co-parenting challenges. And I personally am in a state in my body and my personal growth where I'm starting to come out the other side of a lot of this deep anxiety that I've been in. So I'm starting to feel more like I can access a little bit more energy and effort when it comes to being in a relationship of any kind that has this depth and this, I keep using the word intimacy because I feel like that has often felt like quite hard work for me. Balancing the who you need to be for the other person with who you actually are, and not trying to do that from a place of people pleasing, not trying to do that from a place of performance, and trying to do that from a place of like genuinely getting your needs met and genuinely showing up as yourself and genuinely creating and finding this connection. So I feel so lucky and blessed that I have the partnership that I have. And I feel like we're in a new era of renegotiating so much about our lives and our partnership. And we're coming out of the back of a time that's been really challenging because of the issues I've been facing. And so I know my husband has to negotiate that as well for what he wants and needs. And I have definitely stepped into a bit more of the like, I don't give a fuck era. And so there's so much less that I'm willing to put up with, which maybe would have been fine a couple of years ago because I was so busy mired in my own stuff. And now I'm like, actually, hang on, like, I don't want to take this on, or I don't want to just allow this or whatever, right? So we have to find a new ground. And I feel like this is a universal experience. And this is why I think so many 40s to 50s-year-old women are getting divorced, because they're just like, actually, being on my own sounds pretty good. Doing what I want sounds pretty good. I have the financial independence that I could be on my own. I wouldn't mind sleeping on my own, living on my own, right? And I feel like this is a universal experience. And so we're renegotiating this whole idea of connection in these intimate relationships in our lives and feeling like, actually, do we really need that? Because it would be so nice to just not have the bother of having to try to meet someone else's needs. Right? To not have to bother trying to continue to perform or please or all these things that we've been doing that have depleted our energy, and we're just not into it anymore. And so navigating, how much does this connection matter to me? Is it a good connection? Is it healthy? Is it fueling my better self? Is it part of the good and adventurous and loving parts of me? Or actually, has it just been something I've been tolerating up until now and I'm not willing to tolerate it anymore? For me, I'm definitely on the side of, I know I'm with the right partner. I feel so supported, and I know we're like really intellectually compatible and we want really similar life dreams. And we've just had to navigate the stuff that you do during these phases of life, which takes a toll sometimes. But our connection just keeps coming out stronger when we actually sit down and do the work, when we actually have the conversations, when we actually move through this stuff. And for me, I'm still in a place where I know this is a relationship I'm interested in investing in, and I feel like it's a good one, that's a good fit for me. But that's not true for everyone. Loads of my friends have been going through divorces and renegotiating what it means for them to feel connected. And when they've done the math, it just hasn't added up. And they're like, actually, this partner was for this phase of my life. As I move into the next phase of my life, I don't think this person is a good fit for me anymore. And that's awesome too. Right? So I think as we look at what connection means and how we're navigating that, as we look at our overall joy, our overall happiness, what we want, it's really important to remember that connection is like one of the most basic human needs. You've heard this a million times, probably. We are a tribal species. We are fundamentally wired to be connected to others. This is a really important part of our happiness, our joy. Also, as we look at doing the work that we want to do in the world, so many of us, in addition to stepping into the I don't give a fuck era, we're also stepping into I want to do something. I want to make a difference. I'm thinking about legacy. I'm thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about the problems I see in the world, and I'm ready to step out of my comfort zone and do something about it. And we need each other for any of those things to actually be effective change-making activities. We're not going to be able to accomplish those things on our own. So many of the entrepreneurs I know are stepping into places where they're building their brands into movements, right? One of the things I help people find as a part of the way I do branding is finding an impact statement or an impact goal where they're measuring something outside of money that matters to them. So one of my friends, for example, the impact goal that she has come up with, and I helped her do a rebrand a few years ago, and hers always comes first to mind because I feel like it's so powerful, is Catherine Morgan, and her impact goal is to help 1 million women become financially resilient. Amazing. How cool is that? She has the tools, she has the network, she has the skills, she has the energy, she has the desire to help make that so. So now she just has to define what that means and how she's going to get it done, how she's going to measure it. But she's not going to do that alone, right? That's not going to be something that Catherine, is going to step out and do on her own, right? That's going to require networks and word of mouth and women inviting other women and connection at the end of the day. So I think there's so many levels, of course, back to the one that we talked about at the beginning as well, our connection with ourselves. And this is a place that I really wanted to focus on in this conversation today, because I think so many of us are waking up from this performance and people pleasing parts of ourselves. We're having to actually really ask about the guilt that we feel, about the shame that we've allowed dictate some of our choices, about the boundaries we've not set, about the things that we just accept, and being able to ask important critical questions about how much of that contributes to our joy. And we're so programmed to not be selfish and to put our kids first and to put our partners first. And I think the power dynamics as well, if you're in a relationship where your partner is the primary breadwinner and there's like this money piece at play in those power dynamics, it's really complicated to feel like we have clear and clean ability to create boundaries and to do that without guilt and to do that without feeling like we're not allowed to for whatever set of circumstances, as well as motherhood. We give everything to our kids and we have to be there for them, and we have to set aside what we want and need to make them happy, right? These are the stories that we often tell ourselves, and that starts with pregnancy and birth, right? Where we literally are just vessels for their life, and whatever happens to us as we bring this life into the world. And I think there's so many of us who are walking around with trauma from that experience because it was all about them and had to be all about them in order to bring them safely into the world. And that's just the beginning, right? And I think it's very easy to sometimes step into this victim mode, this martyr mode, because that's what we're supposed to do as opposed to being selfish. And I was just having a chat with my husband the other day, and I was just explaining to him that the way my brain works and the way my conditioning is, the way I am, whatever that means, I don't need labels or boxes, but it just is true, that I spend so much time and energy negotiating mentally and energetically what I'm allowed to do, how I'm allowed to feel, being able to ascertain based on the situation or who's involved or what's happening, what is the appropriate way for me to respond? What is the appropriate behavior for me to have? What am I allowed to fight for? What do I need to relinquish? And that's where this conversation about being selfish, I think, is so complicated. And as we move through this era, I think the number one thing we can do for our connection is to fuel our joy and to fuel our well-being. And I know there's like so many buzzwords in there, but I think it also looks different for every person. And so one of the biggest ahas for me of this period is just how much my ability to connect with other people, to access that love, connection, joy of being in connection, requires me to take care of myself first. And it's not cute. Like it's not like, oh, I'm gonna have a bath, I'm gonna go to the spa. It's like I need to deeply, deeply invest in my nervous system. For me, that's what it is right now. It's different for everyone. But for me, it feels like this endless well of nervous system investment in all the ways, in the supplements and the exercise and the silence and the time alone and the time away where nobody can access me, and the saying no and the discernment in my activities and the saying yes and pushing myself outside of my comfort zone to allow myself to feel filled up even when I feel nervous about the amount of energy that it'll take or that I have to give. And so as we navigate these questions around connection, as we think about connection as it relates to joy, I think it's really important to just remind ourselves how all of that has to move through and connect back to and be funded by basically the bank account of our own connection to ourselves. If you've done personal growth work, you will have probably heard language around being self-resourced. And I think this is such an important theme in this topic around not just looking externally for all our love, all our validation, all of our permission, and more being able to look within and feel connected to something within us, whether that's our intuition, our relationship with God, or whatever it is that we resonate with. But being able to look within and start within to be able to answer our own questions and find our own permission and sit with the decisions that we're making, knowing and allowing ourselves to be confident in the choices we are making for ourselves without needing other people necessarily to always be weighing in on those decisions. I think that is such an important part of where all this connection stuff starts and ends, is the way we relate to and connect with ourselves. The other thing I think we have to contend with here, and this is going to be truer and truer, is finding the lines between what's real and what's imagined, superficial, or contrived. This is one of the JoyFirst battlegrounds, this real versus contrived. And as we have been living in this social media world and this comparison game, which is a totally natural human thing to do, as human beings, we can't just stop comparing ourselves. It's how we function. It's part of our safety. You're not going to be able to stop comparing yourselves to people, but you can resource yourself to have better conversations when that comparison inevitably pops up. But being able to look at things like friendships, for example, in my world, I've taken a step back from a lot of the places that I was operating in and participating in online, and I've reinvested in person and local. I joined a local moms in business networking group, and I've started doing some in-person co-working with them. I have doubled down on wanting to have more and deeper relationships with some of the moms in my neighborhood. I'm looking locally, and I'm looking, in my little circle, in my community, in my town, to actually build roots and relationships with people here and now. And in the past, I've just been so online, especially since moving to the UK, that feels really nourishing to me. And it feels so much easier to gauge where I have real friendships and where there's just this convenient proximity to people. And I found that really challenging, again, with the way my brain works, to be able to understand, like, is this person really a friend? Is this person someone I can count on? Someone who supports me as well as someone I want to support? Or is it just that we ended up in the same bubble and we're just existing side by side? And that's been a really interesting experiment for me, as I've been a part of different communities and watching how women in particular support or don't support each other in those communities, and the conversations that are happening and the priorities that people have. And I'm finding I'm just really feeling drawn to something that feels really real, where I don't have to second guess, where people are actively connected to supporting each other and recommending each other, and doing that, again, in a really real way, not in a like cheesy networking way, but in a like, I've used your products and services and they're amazing and you're amazing and this person needs to know about it way. And it's been so long, I think, since I have felt like really connected to that environment where I knew where I stood. I find like sometimes it's just so hard to know whether the friendships that you have or the connections that you have are legitimate. And when people just disappear and then you never hear from them again, you're like, oh, okay, that was not one of the real ones. Or sometimes you're the one to disappear. I get so bad at connection. Even if I really like someone, even if I'm really invested in that relationship, it's a default for me to disconnect and disengage in communication when I'm going through stress. And the last couple of years have been very stressful. So there's people in my life I really genuinely love who I'm not in contact with on a regular basis. So it goes both ways, of course. But I think looking at finding these real connections and these real friendships and looking in maybe surprising places, I definitely felt like I wasn't sure I was going to be friends with the moms in my world because I felt so weird and different. I felt like the way my lifestyle is, what I value, the fact that I get time and space away from my kids, that I want and need time and space away from my kids, that I'm not a stay-at-home mom, that I'm not this, I'm not that, was like, I didn't know if I'd be accepted by the mama bears. And so it's been really interesting and transformative and joyful for me to find moms that I really resonate with and relate to and enjoy being around, even though in many cases our lives do look very different. We have different partnerships and we have different dynamics in our homes and in our work and in our lives. And it's fine. It's great that we all have different experiences and that we can still find that true and real connection that isn't just like, oh, the kids like each other, so let's have a glass of wine, right? Because again, I can't really suffer through those kinds of conversations very well if I'm not actually interested. So I really would love to hear from you if you take this JoyFirst audit for yourself. How are you coming out on connection? Where are the places you feel strong? Where are the places you know need work? This is one of those well, they all are. It's so easy to say like, this is a priority. They're all a priority. But connection is such an important fuel for everything else. And if you're feeling like you score low on this one, I really encourage you to start with yourself. For me, as we've discussed in Vitality, that includes things like hormones and therapy and also setting deeper, harder boundaries for things that I'm just not willing to accept anymore, even though that's awkward and might not be fair, but it is. And it's what I want or need, and that makes it valid to me. And that's okay, which if you're coming from a lifetime of people pleasing can feel really difficult. But I'd love to hear if you are in the I don't give a fuck era of your life as well and how that's showing up and what does that mean, especially when it comes to the connections in your life. Has it meant that you've let some people go? Has it meant that you found some new people who are really juicy and interesting and special to you because of these things that you share or this experience that you're sharing? I'd love to know. So definitely come hang out with us on Substack. We have conversations in our private community over there, and like I said, I go deeper into some of these topics over there because it's a little bit more intimate and private for us to feel like we can share in a way that isn't the whole internet, right? Next time, I will be diving into our next category, which is one of my favorite, and it is joy. Pleasure, delight. This is an important category. It's not just an extra. It's not something you earn when the work is done. It's a really, really important part that fuels all the rest of this cycle. And I can't wait to dive into it with you next time. Hope you are finding us on YouTube, any podcast player that you enjoy listening to, and then jumping over to Substack where these conversations continue. If you found this conversation interesting, I'd love for you to share it with a friend. This is how we start to build our JoyFirst world, is by getting connected on these basics and being able to fortify ourselves and each other. More of that connection. And I hope this conversation has helped you find, choose, or share a bit more joy today. And I will see you next time.